Well, hello there. Today, we're going to be taking a little walk in the woods and seeing about finding a camp spot and talk about what that entails along the way. So today, we're going to take a walk down in the woods, see about making camp, coming up with some resources, build a fire ring maybe if we got the time, and talk about a few things along the way. The great thing about all of this is when it really comes down to it, it's really up to interpretation. And that's about the only way it really works. So, with that in mind, keep that as food for thought. America and various other different companies have produced a lot of foraging books these days. Seems to be the extremely popular thing. And with it being a very popular thing with woodcraft and various other stuff, then you find that you're going to find extra resources. Now, I do warn and I put a disclaimer out there. If you're going to go out and eat woodland food, wild berries, wild plants, wild mushrooms, wild meat, please, 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 please study. Make sure that you know what you're eating and where you're gathering it is safe. Because if you don't, the end result comes down to effectively you not being able to get yourself out of the woods. You're sick and dying. Horrible experience, and you may not want to go again. With that being what it is, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. One of my biggest influences growing up was a book called Into the Wild. It's about a kid who decided that it was a good idea for him to separate himself from the state of being, which was pretty secular at the time. He was in college, working on a master's degree in law or something like that. Very, very smart kid. The end game was because he didn't know his resources very well, he died in the woods, alone, hungry, and no one found him for years. And there's still a lot of suspicion around what happened to that kid. And people talk about, odd things like, they found a lot of houses around the area where he was, as if somebody had broke into those houses. And with that, well, okay, so now we've got somebody who's an adventurer and written a book about it and all this other stuff and turned his journal in, and he goes out in the woods, and what's the first thing he does? He robs other people. Well, people will do some seriously desperate things, some seriously messed up things when it really comes down to it, especially if they're hungry, danger. Their safety is being violated and they're worried about it. They are going to throw you down in the middle of the campfire and run like hell and not care. Now, I'm not saying your friends are going to betray you or nothing. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I am trying to say is people do not react to stress very well at all. And the whole point of this, which I've said before, is to teach you not to stress. That mindfulness and awareness, and believe it or not, you're going to think this is really hokey, superstitions, that kind of Jedi thing. But if you sit in one place and you're calm enough, you will find enlightenment. Well, what's enlightenment? Are you telling me that I'll go out here and I'll become the Dalai Lama if I just sit in the woods? No, that is not what I'm telling you at all. More along the lines of you will find things in the same manner that he would, because soulfully he sits in one place and thinks, moves forward, observes his environment, feels his environment, and then goes and does. But only when he has to get up and move first. Well, does this look like a good spot to y'all? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. There are a couple advantages to this spot. Like we got a little crevice right here. and you could span the log. You already got one log over it, so you got a real low shelter. You got real low approach, so you could build a little bit of a fire. But we're still kind of in a quagmire of weeds and things, and you have to really, really tune things up a whole bunch, not to set things on fire. You want water to be very convenient. You know, it's not like you got a portable water pump when you're out here. So this is a good spot, but not a great spot for me and what I'm thinking about. So we're going to continue down the trail here. This is another aspect about all of this coming down here. Something you need to be worried about is your footing. You know, this trail that I'm on right now is not necessarily the best trail. It's a game trail back on the property that I stay on, and very familiar area. But personally, I like to take myself off the game trail a little bit because I know animals are going to wander, but I don't necessarily want them to run right through my home, even though I'm only staying there for a little bit. It's their home too, right? Here we go. We're coming up on something neat. Nice flat area. Look at this. Up. Wineberries or raspberries, whichever you wish to call them. They are a type of raspberry, truthfully. They're native to the East Coast, Central East Coast, and they fruit just as much as a blackberry. Very good for you. Another little thing that we walked across that you might enjoy while you stay in the woods. Rose bushes, don't bite me. Coming along. This is a pretty neat little feature here. Some old grapevine. They're called fox grapes. People have been known to make jelly out of them. They're actually kind of tasty. Lots of Russian olives around here. It's an invasive critter. Well, I say critter. Trees are critters to me. I say they're invasive because they were brought here to plant along the edges of interstates to provide shading and shield from headlights, believe it or not. And they were supposed to maintain and check and maintain themselves. And as a notion, it works out pretty good. So, looking at this spot, it's pretty clear. Backs up to a nice sized poplar tree. We're going to talk about poplar trees later, why it's a kind of a bad idea to put a camp underneath one. We got this interesting little creek bank here, a couple of feet from a flat spot. When we look at some things, we got lots of fluffy ferns, plenty of rocks, good space for collecting water. Some other trees other than maples, some dead scrags, and we've got a nice perimeter of tall bushes, so that means a little bit of privacy, which is a good thing. If you could ferret for some privacy and put some large bushes, then things are going to walk around those bushes naturally in the wild, and you'll know what the approach is. I've got two trails. I've got this trail here that I'm on that winds up, and it goes in between some trees there and meanders next to that other poplar. And if you see it, it comes out on the other side there. It's nice and clear. That's definitely a game trail. So I don't necessarily want to put my house there, right? Nor do I want to put my house down here either. We got an embankment, fairly tall embankment, so we know exactly how high water gets. So maybe this side of the creek is not a good idea. Let's see what we got over here. Pretty flat. Water's running good. Got some mushrooms growing on a log. Those look like some oyster mushrooms that have passed their prime, no longer edible. Well, I say no longer edible, mainly because they've gotten past the point where they're really tasty. But yeah, good to know that they're there, though. violets. They're good. Oh, look. Found some examples of some hunting. I guess we've got a fella that's been back here blasting Bambi and left a whole bunch of bones. Remember what I was talking about before? You don't know what other people are going to do, what they're going to be like. Well, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. So I think we've reached our spot. This looks like a good area. I've got some good screening. I got a nice flat spot, not a whole lot of work that has to be done around it. Lots of little poplars, which are not necessarily a bad thing. And scrub wall or screening material. I don't know what you guys think. I think it looks like a good spot to me. But with it being a good spot, the one thing I know about it more than anything else is if it's across the creek, it's not on my property. So I can't exactly come up here to make my camp. So we will mosey on back to where we belong. I thought it was very necessary to show you. Now, the other thing about bushcraft and wilderness survival is we've talked about that things change in a moment. So I went over there and I chucked out a really, really nice camp, as far as I'm concerned. Now, we're having to go back to square zero a little bit and address an area that we approached. And this looks like it might be it. Might be a good one. Everything in here that could be worked down will be worked down pretty effectively. All right, something I wanted to point out. I've done a little clearing over here, and I've got my space opened up a little bit. It's like 15 minutes knocking limbs down. You don't have to be all that aggressive. You don't have to disturb the leaf litter. Just gather up some limbs that may have laid where you were going to put your home. They could come in handy later for a campfire. But importantly, I want to show you something. If you come down here, you see where I'm squatting. Now, I'm not allergic, but most people are. If you look down here, there's one of the most unfriendliest, friendliest friends you'll ever have. I know that sounds silly, right? But all silliness aside, you decide to go to the bathroom and use that as toilet paper, you're going to have one itchy bottom. That is poison ivy. Pretty close to its cousin, which you see out in California and other drier areas, poison oak. Poison oak's also pretty common around seashores. Like I said, they like loose soil, they like the dry, and they tend to grow in bushes where the ivy itself has a tendency to grow like ivy as a vine. Lots of little leaves around here, but nothing terrible. And I don't have a horrible time with it. I think I've gotten it once, maybe twice in the past 10 years. So we should be all good there. But your case, something you might want to recognize as you're finding the camp, you know, something to identify against that is this fella right here. It's got 5 leaves. A lot of people misidentify it as poison oak. It is not. It's actually known as Virginia creeper. The berries are edible, the vine is edible, the leaves are edible. You touch it, rub it on your body. Hell, you could have sex in a pile of it, and it really wouldn't affect you. Other than it would be itchy, uncomfortable, and, you know, probably hilarious for your partner. For those of you who are under the age of 13, I'm not condoning to go out and roll around in a pile of random weeds with your girlfriend. Well, here we are. Back to the subject at hand, which is your camp. Getting up sticks and stuff like that, it's kind of important. You don't want to trip over them. You want firewood. And when you pick them up, see about finding yourself another stick with a barb on it or something, you know? A bare hand reaching down into the leaf litter this time of year is a good way to get spider bit or snake bit. And in some areas of the country, scorpion bit, centipede bit. All sorts of things will bite you if you don't know what's there when you put your hand on it. You wrap your hand around it and boom, there you are. You're bit. That is not necessarily a bad thing. The being bit part, you can take care of it. Most of the things that are native around this area, you're pretty good. For the exception of like some animals, like rattlesnake bites and black widows and things like that, but we're not going to dwell on the absolute worst. I'll talk about how to deal with them later and how to deal with yourself after you've already been bit. I've got a pretty extensive first aid course that I'm putting together for you guys, but that's later in the future. We'll get there in time. Baby steps, right? Baby steps. And with baby steps being what they are, here we are. So, back off from it a little bit. By the way, that's Teddy over there in the bushes. You're going to see him and Charcy a lot in the videos. But I've knocked a lot of the limbs down, give myself a little bit of a blind perimeter. So if you decide to get up in the middle of the night and go visit a latrine and you got a friend, they don't necessarily have to watch your naked bottom walk across the camp. Also helps other kinds of privacy. I just point that out because it sounds funny to me. But yeah, here we are. Now, the other thing to point out is I come down here, you saw where my camp was. I'm only a very slight pan. So that's probably at the most 20 feet from the creek. And if you look at the embankment here, got kind of a tall embankment. Now you keep in mind that if this does get to raining, that this will get high fairly quickly. You can pretty much tell how fast it goes by all the ground it's eat up and how tall the shoulders are. So this is a fast moving creek, but it doesn't swell very high very often. But the good benefit is we've got lots of shiny quartz rocks. I will warn you, you go building a campfire out of these quartz rocks, they have traps in them that these cracks, they hold moisture, and as they get hot, they will cause the rocks to pop and spald. Spalling is basically blowing up. They'll throw shreds of shrapnel all over the place and won't be very good for you, and it'll likely scare the holy Jesus out of you more than it will actually hurt you. Not to say that it won't hurt you, but we've got that to play with as far as resources. And that's all we got to play with. So there are ways around that. Don't build a huge fire with large quartz rocks and expect them not to blow up. So that makes for a good thing. We got still a whole bunch of dead limbs. It must have been some sort of freeze through here, broke the tops out of these trees this winter. Because I got a lot of dead all over the place. It wasn't nearly dead like this last spring. You're going probably, what the hell is he talking about? Just a lot of trees leaned over like that, been pushed over, had died. Tons of limbs. That kind of thing.